Hi, this is Mike O'Brien from Multichannel Merchant. I am the Chief uh, Content Officer for Multichannel Merchant, and we're going to be talking today about something that's been happening as we're all dealing with the COVID and the shelter in place and all that's going on. And obviously, hand sanitizer is an area that's continuing to be in high demand, and retail shelves in a lot of places are often empty. And there's a lot of companies that had started up production to meet the demand, but it's often been hard to find. So we're talking today with Soapbox Soaps, and they answered the call from retailers and fulfilled orders in less than 2 weeks to stock shelves. There's basically two major manufacturers, Gojo, which makes Purell and Vyjon. They make private label as well as germX products, and they were only supplying to hospitals and government contracts and Walmart respectively. To meet the demand, Soapbox reached deep into its supply chain to purchase 23 semi-tractors of ethyl alcohol to get sanitizer stock out to its 13,000 retailers, including stores like Wegmans, Walgreens, Rite Aid. More than 3 million bottles of sanitizer were produced in less than 2 weeks after they secured an FDA-approved formula for the product within 24 hours, a process that normally takes about 9 months. So today we're talking with David Simnick, and David is the CEO, and Daniel Dahl is the president and COO of Soapbox Soaps. We want to hear about how they're able to pull this off. So David and Daniel, welcome today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Okay, so whoever wants to address this first one, or maybe both, obviously sanitizer has been an extremely hot ticket, continues to be. So how exactly was Soapbox able to procure so much product in a short space of time when others were not?
So that's an excellent question. And I think that the overarching headline on how this all was done is through relationships and trust. So Soapbox has been making products for about 10 years. What we're known for is shampoo, conditioner, body wash, liquid hand soap, which I have in my hand. And we always thought about having hand sanitizer, and we had it kind of in the innovation pipeline, but it was Starbucks that reached out to us first, and I think it's because they have operations in Asia as well as just globally. And we've been working with them to change their liquid hand soap over to our product so that we could donate more. Every time someone buys one of Soapbox product, we are fortunate and able enough to donate a bar of soap to local homeless shelters, food pantries, various different NGO efforts all across the world. So we have been working with Starbucks. They sent us an email. They said, "Hey, we need you to make hand sanitizer." And we're like, "Huh, okay. That's a pretty big opening order. Let's get back to you." And then the next day we were talking with Wegmans as they were ordering about 50,000 of these. And they were like, "Oh, we just asked them, do you need hand sanitizer?" And they were like, "Yeah, we'll take over 1 million units." So we were like, "Okay, all right. We'll get back to you soon too." So I think on the sales side, on the customer side, the need was immediate, and it was severe towards the end of February and the first week of March. And then Dan, who leads all of our supply chain here, as well as product development, continues to pull miracles out of miracles. And I did not misspeak on that. I meant that exact phrase. So I think he can go into, after we got the demand and we saw that become incredibly transparent from all of our different partners, we then turned and said, "Okay, how can we take this in the pipeline and immediately draw it, bring it up so that we can make it today?"
Okay, great. And that actually leads into the next part of this, and thanks for that. And Daniel, so to walk me through the supply chain part of this, all the logistics involved in the procurement, and like what kind of technology process and partnerships you had to put in place and in a hurry to make all this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. As Dave mentioned, there's never really been a time that retailers have come to us for any product saying, whatever you can make, whatever you have in stock, we'll take all of it. And so for me, on the sales side, that's like the best thing you could ever hear. On the operations side, it's like, well, if that's happening at one retailer, then it's going to affect the entire supply chain. And so the biggest thing that we had to do, like Dave mentioned, is really just trust and work with partners that we've known for a long time. Some that we sort of knew made hand sanitizer, some that have turned on the capability once the FDA changed a little bit of the regulations, just to really make sure that we stood up facilities that we could trust, that could turn through the product that we need and produce a high quality product to our brand standard, and deliver it quickly. And the next piece is sort of working the next level down and making sure that all the raw materials are ready to be produced, like the ethyl alcohol, and negotiating our own contracts there, like the components like caps and pumps. There's basically a worldwide shortage on all the packaging components that you can think of. I've gotten lead time quotes back up to 55 weeks for caps, and obviously you can't deliver units without a way to close it. So just making sure that we had our supply chain shored up to deliver on the requests the retailers had. And so the first bit, like Dave said, trust, and trying to line up the supply chain in the best way possible to support the future growth of the business. That said, I mean, we never thought that it would be the kind of growth that we're seeing now. And so the last part is just sort of positioning, just being out there, making sure that people are aware of what we're doing, trusting in the brand, trusting in our mission, and giving us the opportunity to deliver their needs, making sure that we over communicate where a lot of others are falling short. We kind of step up and are able to deliver, and we've seen a lot of instances, just crazy staggering numbers of people writing us and saying, yesterday I thought I was getting 3 million units, and today I found out I'm getting 30,000. And how does a brand like Soapbox step into that role, make them feel at ease, make them feel confident in our ability to deliver? And that really comes down to our people, our partners, and our supply chain.
Okay, and particularly as far as like the procurement and the sourcing of this, how did that part of it happen, like such a massive quantity in such a short period of time, and with everything so challenged that it is right now, supply chain?
So I have a funny story on that. We now have 4 different facilities in the United States that are making hand sanitizer. So in about a month, we went from 0 to 4. So it's been, to answer your question, lack of sleep, lots of coffee, and tons of prayer and luck. I think somewhere, combination of all those 3. But it really comes down to, and Dan was saying this earlier, but it comes down to relationship, and I think it also comes down to trust. So there was one of those facilities was like, okay, well, we've been talking to you guys for years, but like we've never actually formally worked together. How do I know if I can trust you? And we're like, hey, refresh your bank account. And we just wired them money, and we just said, look, we trust you, trust us. Like, we want to make sure that that you're covered. And I think a lot of what we've been able to do is because all along the 10 years that we've been in business, we've always made decisions on in the long term, in terms of like, always act with character, always put yourself in other people's shoes, always do the right thing. And I can't think of a better time in order to have that reputation in the industry. I remember there was this one time where we, unfortunately, because of a miscommunication, we shipped a retailer only 2 layers of a pallet instead of the required layers. And because of that, that really messed up the whole merchandising of a program and one of the big club retailers. And because of that, the sell-through was nowhere near expectations. It had to be marked down. And basically everything that we sold in, we ended up having to return, plus some, in order to make that retailer whole. And we had the option of walking away from that retailer and saying, this is on you. But that buyer then went on to become DMM and then a vice president of another organization. And we continue to do business with that person today. So I think, those type of relationships and just doing the right thing, because it's the right thing to do, I think is paid off multiple times.
Okay, so the timeline of what you described to me earlier about and what we talked about at the top of this of the procurement of that massive amount and out to all your wholesale retail channels, that timeline was like late February into March, roughly, right?
So we started shoring up our first supply of alcohol in the second week of March. We had been asked by Starbucks originally in the third week of February for their Asia business, and then again about 2.5 weeks later for their US business. And then that sort of conversation with Wegmans, like Dave mentioned, sort of spurred us into saying, if there's open to buys out there for Starbucks and Wegmans, then there's probably a lot of people that are looking for sanitizer as well. And our core business tenet, the more we sell, the more we can give. And obviously, like Dave mentioned, we've been talking about hand washing and using, proper hygiene practices and getting bar soaps to people in need for 10 years. And so we sat back with the team and said, if there's any time to act, it's right now. As a social mission, personal care company, stepping up and doing what society needs us to do. And so we turned that on in early March to set up the supply chain. And then since then, we've added multiple suppliers to increase the throughput, to deal with more customers and bring on more customers in more types of business, make sure that we had the ability to service hospitals, all kinds of, whether it's retail, whether it's food service, et cetera. Just making sure that everyone that we can serve, possibly serve, can get what they need.
Okay, and so like currently and then kind of going forward, what does the business look like in this particular product line as far as the kind of demand that's there, and like basically a brand new category for you guys, and
right,
obviously serving through the rest of the pandemic and the crisis portion of it, but then kind of like going on beyond that, what do you see, what do you envision?
Yeah, so I think when we view at the future, and say, okay, we already know that we're in the hand sanitizer business for good now, because so we are supplying and privileged to supply Walgreens, Rite Aid, Harris Teeter, Starbucks, Giant, Stop and Shop, basically Ahold, Wegmans, and a wide variety of other different retailers, AFS, and there's a couple others that are coming on board, but we've already been confirmed with a couple of those that this is going to continue well beyond just thankfully the flattening of the curve. So we definitely know that we're in the hand sanitizer business and just sanitization overall. But what's really interesting is the amount of customers that traditionally would not have hand sanitizer that have come to us and said, look, as you said at the beginning of this interview, Gojo Industries as well as Vyjon have focused on private label and taking care of hospitals as they should. I think what's been really interesting for us is that we've also stepped in and started shipping to hospitals and nursing homes and to any frontline worker whatsoever. But you're going to start seeing hand sanitizer, in restaurants, and you're going to start seeing hand sanitizer at the nightstand of a hotel room, and all these customers that we had before, and then also new customers that we've never even thought of approaching, have come to us and said, hey, we saw on the news that you have hand sanitizer and we need that, and this is why we want it. And Dan, I think, brilliantly coined this visualization of what the future looks like in terms of a restaurant experience, but I don't want to take Dan's thunder. And one last thing is, honestly, I can't say this enough, our whole team can't say this enough. Dan has just pulled miracles out of miracles in his whole operations and supply chain team, in terms of air freighting caps and bottles and getting labels to be made overnight. It's miracles. So Dan, what's the phrase that you always say in terms of restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's our team and it's our supply chain just stepping up and making sure that everyone is aware of the importance of these items, and it comes down to communication to like our label supplier, for example, and they know that it's the right thing for them to do to prioritize their supply chain to make sure that we get labels for sanitizer to help people in need, before a cosmetic label, for example. It's just everyone is sort of prioritizing these products first and foremost, and that's helping us get what we need even faster. Like Dave mentioned, I mean, it's our opinion, and I think it's the opinion of most probably, that this pandemic and COVID-19 has changed the way that consumers think about health and hygiene. It's changed human consumption globally of hygiene products, and we see a scenario where if you're not going into a New York restaurant with salt, pepper, and sanitizer on the table, you're not going to trust that restaurant. If your deli doesn't have it by the checkout counter, you're not going to trust it. If your hotel doesn't have it when you check in, you're not going to trust it, and you're not going to feel comfortable staying there. And that's not just like late 2020. We think that's 2021 and beyond. And so, when you speak specifically to our supply chain, sort of what's next for us is, number one, just delivering on retailer commitments, POs that we already have in place, helping serve the rest of the people that we've pledged product to over the next call it 60 days, making sure that everyone sort of gets back in stock. And then sort of the next bit is, how do we take what we've done, sort of cobbling pieces together of a decimated global supply chain, and put that to something that is more representative of the brand, is more representative of how we want to portray the product, the features and benefits, sort of bring it into sort of one unified experience across our multiple manufacturers. And then it's sort of thinking about what's next for the strategy of how we sort of bring the sanitizer to market in a more sustainable way versus just the huge needs that we have now. And how do we work with people to think creatively about the product offering, where it's placed, how the brand and the mission benefit, and how the consumers benefit from having the product there. So from a supply chain perspective, from a prioritization perspective, kind of like now over the next year, that's kind of what we're working on.
Okay, great. And then the last part, and this is a question for David. It appears that most of the business is on the wholesale retail side and not as much in direct. Is that something that you envision changing at all, especially as, to Daniel's point, the consumer behavior changing in terms of, sanitization being like, part of the new normal?
I think for us, the reason why we have always gone more with our retail partners is because we wanted to always be at an accessible price point. So the problem with D2C, if you're running it yourself, is it costs so much to ship 12 ounces, or with one of our hand sanitizers, a pound of liquid. I mean, the shipping alone immediately takes away the value for that end consumer. If you're selling a liquid hand soap for $3.99 and you're selling this for $5 or $6. And I think from our perspective, we go, okay, we have our own D2C site, and we never try to compete in price with our retail partners or our other online partners, because the majority of our business is there. But for consumers who want to buy directly from us, who want to support our mission directly, then we're going to have that option. But I think, having known a bunch of other entrepreneurs who are running ventures that are mostly D2C, there's a big fundamental problem with a lot of D2C startups right now, and that is that cost per acquiring consumer digitally is just so expensive, and that's happening and has been happening, Michael, just because all the big guys that have gotten into advertising on Facebook and Google have just crowded out the market so much that the rates have gone up. And for us, we look at this and say, we're not going to spend in that channel, but if someone wants to ambiently come to us and buy from our own D2C, great, we're gonna take care of you. What is really interesting is when we look at just the efficiency of time, for us to coordinate with a customer service of like a 3 or 4 unit order on this, given the market dynamics, we could also potentially have sold 30,000 units using the same amount of time and effort to one of our retail partners, or 300 or 3 million. This whole last 6 weeks have been such a blur that Dan and I jokingly say that we haven't slept for a month, and that might be true. that actually might be true. But I think a lot of it is, as Dan said, we feel that if there ever was a time that there was a company that was started because Dan and I and the founding team cared very deeply about providing health and hygiene to those who need it most. If there's ever been a time for a company that is mission driven on trying to increase awareness of washing your hands for 20 seconds and proper health and water sanitation and hygiene, like it's now. So we were able to donate 1.7 million bars to local homeless shelters and food pantries with Feeding America at the beginning of March. Given the success that our brand has had in all of our products, every single SKU that we sell is up right now, and some are exploding. We're going to be able to donate millions and millions of more bars of soap to homeless shelters, food pantries, women and children abuse centers, nursing homes, just throughout the whole country. And we're talking, so to put some numbers around this, it took us 10 years to donate 10 million. It's going to take this year to donate another 10 million.
Wow, good stuff. So fascinating story, and I'm glad that you guys are in a position to be able to do that kind of thing, both to provide to your channel, but also to do good as well. So Daniel and David, thanks very much for your time today.
Michael, thank
you
you
so much.